Greetings. More random, more random thoughts on what I want to include in my ultimate essay or book about what's happened to the American mind. Um, James Baldwin himself wrote some stuff about what it's like kind of being a writer in culture. It's a real funny stuff to say. So you begin to hate everybody, which means you hate yourself. But he said your world narrows to a red circle of rage. I thought that was pretty funny. But he says a writer, somebody asked him, hey, can a black writer make it today? This back in his day. And he said, yeah, a writer, black or white, doesn't really have much of a chance because nobody wants a writer till he's dead. But to answer your real question, there's a greater chance for a black writer today than there has ever been. That's what he said. But I've been looking over some notes today, going way back, going Marshall McLuhan, but before 1964, he wrote The Gutenberg Galaxy, 1961, 1962. It's pioneering work, dealing with oral culture, print-based culture, cultural studies, media ecology. And he talked about like there's going to be this electronic interdependence. Electronic media is going to replace a lot of things, and you're just going to have to be in that, interact with the electronic media, that world, which is like the internet, what we have now. Individual would increasingly identify with a tribal base, some sort of group, ideologically similar to themselves. 1962. He talked about this thing, the noosphere. It's an evolution of the human mind into the noosphere. It's externalization of our senses, creates a noosphere or a technological brain for the world. So kind of like what everybody's talking about now, the AI, what's we've been immersed into this thing. We're all are going to be tapping into is the noosphere. Pretty interesting. Harold Innis was one of his students. Um, had said some really interesting stuff. Talking about in the 50s, he was writing about stuff. We would definitely want to include some of what he has said. Guy Debord, I always like to talk about him, the Society of the Spectacle. He's talking about what is fascism. Somebody asked him, what is fascism? He says that fascism is technologically equipped primitivism. Think about that. Primitivism, tribalism, hate as mankind faces scarcity and crisis. Capitalism breaks down. The elites have new things now, new tools, new technological tools, and we are immersed in this tribal world, this noosphere. The surrender of culture to technology. Harold Innis talks about knowledge monopolies. You remember during the height of the pandemic, there was this real thing that came out where you were really shamed for doing your own research. And everyone was like, oh, you can't do that. You got to trust the science, trust the conformity culture, the orthodoxy. You can't question. In other words, stop doing science yourself. So it's this surrender. And there's there's a new tech elite, and they'll tell you, they'll release the information they want you to have when they're ready for you to have it. Shoshana Zuboff kind of warns straight up. One of the things she says in her book, Surveillance Capitalism, is that surveillance technology, really the end result of it is we're going to lose our humanity. We're no longer going to be humans that you can recognize. And I think that's really happening. I mean, I think there's some forces driving all these shootings that are happening, all these mass shootings, school shootings, shootings at old workplaces, and all this kind of stuff. And it's not just take away the guns, because guns are already out there. Sorry, and no one wants to take them away from police, the militarized police, and the defense contractors are selling more weapons than ever. So you can't, it's totally cognitive dissonance to be like, oh, well, let's take them away from poor people, so let's make sure they don't have guns. But there are forces at work that are kind of forcing us to lose our humanity, lose our hope. People realize, if they're pushed out of this circle, there's no frontier for them to go to. There's no wilderness where they can get on their horse and ride 100 miles west of here and just settle on somewhere out in nature, because it's all been gone. It's all gone. It's all privatized. It's all controlled. Everything is now coming into the same digital net, and we can all feel it. We can feel that it's happening at this time, that there's scarcity, right? Because the rich people kind of looted everything. The hedge funders, everything they've looted our treasury to such a degree. There's not enough left for everybody. So there's going to be a scarcity war, and their answer for that is technological suppression, militarized technological police state. Um, you know what is described as technologically enhanced primitivism. They're calling people that have their own ideas, people that talk outside of the rubric of accepted speech now. They're calling them anti-authority ideologues, domestic violent extremists. That's often what you're hearing about people that have really done no violent act yet. They haven't done anything. They're not necessarily talking they're going to, but they're maybe talking, they're asking questions about vaccinating children. Or they're asking questions about the value of a lockdown, or the value of a mask policy based on cloth masks that don't stop transmission, stuff like that. So people that are asking questions, going against the accepted narrative, they're starting to be branded as domestic violent extremist. There was some news broadcast with people predicting, yeah, we're thinking that people that are vaccine hesitant are going to become increasingly violent. And so they're just kind of priming the pump with all this to really come after people. It's really sad that that's happening. In a Playboy interview in 1969, um, Marshall McLuhan said that the day of political democracy as we know it is finished, as man is tribally metamorphosed by electronic media. That was 1969. So, um, I want to read a lot more books. Douglas Rushkoff's Present Shock. But the book that I keep coming back to lately is Global Civil War, Capitalism Post Pandemic. Sounds so hyperbolic, but it's really a good book. It's very well studied, very well cited, and it goes through this, what's happening to us with the globalization, the digitalization, and the financialization of our whole world, of our economy, our school, our media, our medicine. Everything is being turned into a commodity that benefits, private equity, and we're being manipulated digitally, right? So, read that book. Please, I want more people to read that book and wrestle with this book. It's so important. It's so key. It's such a great book. I know I've kind of jumped around a lot today. Um, my mind's kind of racing, but there's a lot going on, and it's my mind has known this for a while, that this digital net is tightening around us, and that there's an elite class out there in the world, um, and they're using things, this hyper focus on identity, um, is one way that they've distracted the left from looking at class politics and from looking at what's really going on, just by having them focused. When you focus on, hey, I'm an empowered LGBTQ, that's great, and that was a real struggle. That is a struggle for rights that we want to maintain, want to look at. But in terms of the our epic struggle with the working class versus the ruling class, it doesn't really. They don't care. They love it when you focus on that. That's you know, and that's what the kind of left is so easily kind of duped by right now. And they've actually done a lot of work to separate race from class, to just make sure that you never look at anything class oriented, and that when people go to talk about class issues, that they themselves are kind of branded as racist. So they've spun that on its head, and these things used to be a conjoined. The struggle for race equality was a struggle for class equity as well, and so we want to put those things back together. We want to see that they are related, but and then look at in terms of class and crunch the numbers in terms of economics, what's happening economic to different sets of people, some of it based on the color of their skin, some of it just based on their proximity to power or their relation to power as either a worker or an investor. That needs to come back into the analysis more for the left. Over on the right, you've got nationalism, which sometimes can be good. It's good to be proud of your country and stuff like that, but a lot of times this gets weaponized so that you don't look at the power elite. It's not very fashionable to talk about the power elite on the right, and instead they want you chauvinistic. They want you racist. Scapegoating, the old thing. Focus on immigrants, right? So you're facing financial precarity. You've lost some rights. Things didn't go well during the pandemic. Um, so the answer is never to look at the people in power who are actually doing things. It's maybe to talk about the immigrants or something like that. And that's a trick they play on the right. So the right needs to get better. There needs to be a unity of right and left, working class that has class consciousness and no longer falls for these tricks that your big problem is the unvaccinated or the immigrants or people that listen to NPR or people that don't listen to NPR or people that have white skin or some people that have black skin, Willie Horton or Donald Trump. Or it's not Willie Horton or Donald Trump, right? They're both just those were distractions, and we need to quit falling for it. But and we need an analysis of the digitalization of our media environment. People need to be aware of that, what that's like, what it's doing to them, and how they're going around repeating these talking points on cue, put out by the ruling elites. Hey, the good thing for you to think is that ivermectin is just a horse dewormer. Because we're trying to sell a lot more of these vaccines. We're already pushing that really hard. We really want everyone to go with that. So can't be any early treatments that could save lives. And as evil and banal as that sounds, they did that, right? The ruling elites convinced a lot of people that nothing else worked. Nothing could help them when they got exposed to the virus. They couldn't. It's an airborne virus. They couldn't go in and rinse with salt water drops or saline and rinse with Listerine and thereby reduce the number of the virus setting up in their nose. None of that would work for them. Zinc wasn't relevant for them, right? And that's all false information. And still, people still don't know here in the West. They do in a lot of other countries because they had to save themselves because they didn't really get vaccines. And even though the vaccines don't really work that great, they never even got those. So we were really lied to. And we need to get around to figuring that out. I think reading some stuff about it now would be really great, starting with Global Civil War
by Professor William I. Robinson. Be a great place to start. I really recommend that.